Hi everybody and welcome to today's assembly. I hope you had a really good week in school last week. It sounds that it's worked really well, and I'm really proud to hear how quick everybody's settled back into that school routine and that rhythm of school. I know for some of you, you will have been away from school for quite some time, and the adults and the children who were in school were very much looking forward to having you back. So I'm really proud to hear how well you've settled in. I'm really pleased to hear how well you're getting on in your classes. And it must be great to be back there with your classmates in your classroom, with the adults that are there to help you with your learning and to make sure that you're doing the best you can and making the best progress possible. So well done to you all. The assembly today is focusing on our school value, and as you know, I'm just going to share my screen. Our school value for this half term is thinking very much about respect, and our posters around the school are there to remind us about what respect looks like and what we will see each other doing if we're showing that good respect. And something happened this week that made me think very much about respect and how, particularly about how we take care of each other and treat each other. And that tied in very much with one of our school rules, which is the one at the very bottom of our school poster about respecting people's feelings and property. And that made me think about how important the respect that we give each other is. And it really makes a difference. If we can treat each other as we would like to be treated, that makes for such a much happier place. And you can try that for yourself, because if you are walking down the corridor or out in the playground, if you smile at somebody, usually they'll smile back. If you're polite to somebody, usually they'll be polite back. If you're kind to somebody, usually they'll be kind back. And if you're grumpy or rude or argumentative, then people don't really enjoy that. And they might be rude and grumpy and argumentative back. But you can try it for yourself later on today. Try smiling at somebody. See what happens, because I bet they smile back. So what happened that made me think about our value respect? Well, my wife had been shopping to the local supermarket, and while she was queuing up in a long queue, waiting with her trolley to go through the checkout, there was a gentleman at the checkout who seemed to be having a disagreement with the lady who was serving him. And the longer the disagreement went on, it seemed to be becoming, she said, more argumentative. And she said the gentleman who was there seemed to be getting ruder and ruder. She couldn't really hear what was happening, but she could tell from the body language and the way they were acting together that he was getting ruder. And eventually the store manager was called over, and the gentleman had to leave his shopping and was asked to leave the store. Now, I don't know what he did to get more food shopping, but it made me think about how important it is that we show each other that respect. And maybe if he had behaved slightly differently, he might not have had to leave the supermarket. But it made me think about how we treat each other and how important it is. It reminded me of a story I heard about an old lady who lived and had lived for many, many years in the same house on the same road. And she knew all the neighbours around, some who had moved in and had lived there for a bit and then had moved on. Other people had come in. But Mrs. White knew everyone. And she was a really lovely, kind and thoughtful lady. She was always prepared to help people if they needed it. She would never say unkind things about people. And she was never too busy to stop and have a chat with anybody, whether it was an elderly person in the street or one of the young children that lived there. But everybody knew her, and she was seen as a very kind lady. And she always used to say, treat others. Treat others like you would like to be treated yourself. And she would remind people of this again and again. Well, one time there was a new family that moved into the street. And the family had some cats and dogs and lots of children. And they moved in, and before very long, they were a little bit of a nuisance. They were a very noisy family, and the street was very quiet. And they didn't really seem to think about anybody else other than themselves. Mrs. White, whenever she met one of the family, she would always smile. She would always say good morning or good afternoon. And she would always remind them to treat other people like they would like to be treated themselves. But the family didn't really listen. In fact, they laughed a little bit at her. And things like they were always lighting bonfires in their back garden, never mind if people had washing out that they were trying to dry, or it was a nice summer's day and the people had the windows of their houses open. Soon their houses would fill with a really dark, smelly smoke because they would be having another bonfire. And even if people asked them not to, or to be a bit more thoughtful about not having so many, they ignored it. The mum used to tip the rubbish over the fence and didn't really mind or worry whether it blew around into other people's gardens or up and down the street, long as she had got rid of the rubbish. That was what was important. And the children used to play football in the street, which wasn't a problem, but the ball went into somebody's garden. They would trample across the flower beds, breaking the flowers, damaging them, and they would never really take care or thought for anybody else. And often they'd be out playing really late, making lots of noise. And for those families that had young children that were trying to go to sleep, they would be woken up. And the family really didn't think about anybody else very much at all. One day, the mum was cooking dinner, and she had something cooking on the oven in the kitchen. She was distracted and went away. And when she came back, she found that actually whatever had been cooking was started to caught fire. And actually it had done some damage to all the cupboards, and the cupboards were smouldering and the room was filling with smoke. Well, they had to get out of the house as quick as possible, and they rang the fire brigade. And before long, the fire brigade turned up. Thankfully, they put the fire out and there wasn't very much damage. However, it did mean that until the kitchen was repaired, the family wouldn't be able to use it. What were they going to do? The whole house smelt of smoke as well, so they didn't really want to stay there. Well, as the fire had been going on and the fire brigade had called, some of the neighbours had gathered around to see what was happening. And when the fire brigade left, Mrs. White stepped forward and she spoke to the mum and dad of this new family, and she said, look, don't worry, we can all help you. If you can't use your kitchen, if you can't sleep in your house, I'm sure that between us we can all help you. And that's exactly what all the neighbours did. Some of them took the children in and gave them tea. Some of them gave them a bed for the night so they could sleep over. Some of them helped to clear out all the damaged cupboards and to then replace the new ones so that the kitchen could be used again. And together, the neighbours all helped them. They all treated them as they would like to be treated themselves. And one afternoon, the mum from the new family looked at Mrs. White and it said, well, why? Why are you all being so kind to us? And Mrs. White smiled and said, we try to treat each other like we would like to be treated ourselves. And if something had happened to one of our houses, we would all hope that everybody would help us. And that's why we're helping you. And from that time onwards, that new family that had been noisy and not really listened to anything anybody had asked and just thought about themselves changed. And they started to think about other people, and they started to treat other people like they would like to be treated. They didn't trample flowers down. They got their ball back carefully. The dad didn't light so many bonfires in the garden, and the rubbish wasn't tipped over the fence. So it's really important. Treat other people like you would like to be treated. Try it. See what happens. Be smiley. Be polite. Be kind. And then people will be the same to you. This Friday, we've got Red Nose Day coming up, and unfortunately, we're not going to do the normal things that we do for Red Nose Days, and we would ask that you don't bring red noses in, just because we're trying to limit the things we're bringing into school to make sure that we're not spreading any germs around at all. So what we would ask you to do is been on the school newsletter this week, and there'll be an email later to your mums and dads and people at home later in the week. What we'd like you to do is to write down one of your favourite jokes, and on Friday morning bring it into class, and the classes can then share those jokes together and select a class favourite, and those class favourites we will get displayed around the school so that everybody can share in those favourite jokes. So we really hope you've got a week to try and find one of those favourite jokes you've got and write it down, bring it in, and your class will choose which one's their favourite. And what we would ask is that you bring in a donation for the Red Nose Day appeal so that we can collect some money for the charity to send off. Maybe 50p or £1 would be brilliant, and you can put that in, take that into your class and put it in the pot, the collection pot that will be there. So have a fantastic week. I look forward to hearing some of those funny jokes on Friday. Work hard, remember that growth mindset, and remember to treat other people like you would like to be treated yourself. Take care.